Ned Nwoko is back in the spotlight, and it's for all the wrong reasons. At what point does a response stop being about clarification and start becoming insecurity? Regina Daniels went to the UK and took a drug test. The results came back negative, clear, documented, final. That should have been the end of the story, because when an accusation is met with evidence, there is nothing left to argue about. The truth doesn't need defending once it's established. But this story didn't end there, and not because of the test, but because of what came after it. And that's how we know this was never really about drugs. But let's backtrack a bit, because this didn't happen in a vacuum. The reason Regina Daniels took the drug test wasn't because a new accusation suddenly appeared. It was because an old one never really went away. For months, long before this moment, drug addict had become a label repeatedly attached to her name. So this wasn't a reaction, it was a decision. She went to the UK and took the test in a setting that leaves little room for doubt or manipulation. Not for sympathy, not for applause, but for clarity. And when the result came back negative, she didn't use it as a weapon. Instead, she followed up with a video, and the tone matters here. She didn't sound angry, she didn't sound defensive. She said the only drug she takes is ecstasy, not as a confession but as sarcasm, a way of reclaiming a narrative that had been forced onto her for far too long. More importantly, she didn't attack anyone, she didn't name names, she didn't reopen old wounds. She addressed the accusation, not the person behind it. And that distinction is important, because when someone clears their name with evidence, what usually follows is closure. But I don't think that closure exists in Ned Nwoko's dictionary. Because, well, barely hours after Regina's post, then came the reply from none other than Ned himself. And the content of this reply is quite interesting. It begins with a dramatic warning: don't be fooled. Excuse me, sir. As adults, shouldn't we be allowed to make our own decisions? To, clear our own names? Apparently not. In his words, temporary abstinence apparently demands public caution. Funny, right? But also telling. From the very first line, we get a sense of the tone: corrective, urgent, and well, a little bit performative. The reply itself is long, paragraphs upon paragraphs, emotional, detailed, and in every line, the purpose seems less about clarifying the facts and more about reasserting control. He spends a section questioning the conditions under which the test was conducted, contrasting it with earlier reports from Nigeria and South Africa, emphasizing that those reports were professionally compiled, formally documented, and will be defended in court. Your test doesn't matter. That is what he means. My narrative is the one that counts. He also repeatedly insists that a negative result today does not erase the past. That temporary abstinence is insufficient. That accountability is not performative. And that rehabilitation must be quiet, sustained, and structured. By his own definition, of course. He even corrects the way Regina referenced MDMA, reminding everyone that renaming it does not alter its chemical composition, risks, or impact on judgment. Technically accurate, but delivered with the air of someone saying, I am the adult here, and you must understand this. Then comes paragraphs about his private attempts to support her, the court-ordered therapy, and how all of this was supposedly handled discreetly. None of this again was requested. None of this needed to be made public. Yet, here it is in detail. So we ask the question, why the reply at all? What exactly was he correcting that the test hadn't already answered? The answer is simple. A response wasn't required for the truth to stand. The negative drug test cleared her name, end of story. But the reply didn't disapprove the test. It didn't clarify anything. It only recentered the narrative on him. And that is exactly the point where the story stops being about drugs and starts being about control. Before we fully analyze the most recent reply, we need to go back, way back. Because the truth is, this pattern isn't new. The way this saga has unfolded over the past months and even years, because we're in a new year, has been consistent. This isn't about the latest statements. It's about how a pattern of reaction has been established. A pattern where replying publicly, quickly, and dramatically takes priority over calm restraint. Let's set the scene. Mid-October 2025, a video surfaces alleging domestic violence. Details are shocking: confrontations, tied restraints, private struggles suddenly thrust into the public eye. Whether Regina herself posted it or not, The world saw it and the clock started ticking. Now here's the critical point. Less than 24 hours later, Ned Nwoko responded. And how did he respond? Publicly, aggressively, accusatory, and instead of addressing the domestic violence allegation itself, he attacked her character. The headline of his post says it all. Regina's unprovoked carnage and rampage in my house and in my absence. From the very first sentence, you can see the tone, dramatic, judgmental, and immediate. Regina was not always like this, he says. Her current battle with drugs and alcohol abuse is the root of her problem. She must continue her rehabilitation program or I fear for her life and safety. Now she has moved to a place where she will have unrestricted access to drugs. She's the violent one here, slapping and hitting 3 staff in the past 48 hours and destroying property, including cars and windows, for no just cause. Now pause for a second. Think about that. A serious allegation of domestic violence was made, and instead of addressing the issue, maybe meeting it with a calm denial or some sort of private intervention, what came was a public character assassination. He didn't address the incident itself. He labeled her a drug addict. He recounted chaos in detail. He named alleged suppliers. The effect? The moment escalated instead of calming. He put the entire conflict on full display, inviting public judgment, gossip, and scrutiny. And it all happened within 24 hours. Here's the key observation. From day one, he has chosen reaction over restraint. This early response set the tone for everything that followed. He established a pattern where every opportunity to step back, act privately, or remain silent was replaced by immediate public and performative reaction. And now fast forward months later, when a drug test clears Regina's name, when she handles it calmly and with evidence, the world shouldn't need another reply. But patterns once established tend to repeat themselves, and that is why the recent reply, though long, detailed, and emotional, is only the latest chapter in the story that began in October 2025. Now, if you're thinking this is a one-off problem, think again, because patterns are rarely one-off. A pattern is something that repeats consistently over time, showing a clear trajectory of behavior, and that's exactly what we are seeing here. What we're about to do is take a closer look at another example. Moments where he has repeated the same pattern, moments where instead of de-escalating, instead of calming things down or handling them privately, he has chosen to escalate. And before we even get into the posts themselves, think about the word de-escalate. That's the approach most conflicts need. Calm, measured responses, private solutions, quiet resolutions. But the pattern here is immediate reaction, public statements, accusations, character assassinations, all designed to recenter attention on him rather than resolving the issue at hand. So now let's move to another example. At a point in time, Regina was publicly venting, ranting. Really, she was out and about expressing her frustrations, saying she wanted to be left alone, pointing out what she thought were fingers in the background, possibly belonging to Ned. Whether she was paranoid, whether this was real, we don't know. But what we do know is this. A young woman expressing her feelings about a situation that seemed out of her control is not extraordinary. Other people might even act worse. And yet, this is exactly when Ned decided to reply. His post titled, "Senator Ned Nwoko is not chatting with Regina and does not want her back in the house." This sets the tone immediately. Dramatic, public, and unnecessary. From the start, he frames the situation as one where Regina is entirely under the influence of drugs, and he labels her claims as lies from the pit of hell. He goes on to recount details of her alleged behavior, destruction of property, alleged violence, and her social circle's involvement. He even includes a WhatsApp message dated October 17th, outlining curfews, rules, ultimatums, and threats. It is either you continue with your therapy or you check into the rehab in Asokoro. My health is deteriorating because of your situation. I am worried about your life and what will happen with the kids. More importantly, I won't fund your lifestyle again until you're fully rehabilitated. Now think about that. All of this was publicly posted within hours of a private rant. The world was now reading accusations, private WhatsApp messages, detailed descriptions of her alleged actions. Was this necessary? Absolutely not. Could this have been handled privately, calmly, and with restraint? Of course. Instead, it became another public escalation, another clear example of the pattern we've been talking about. Notice the key points here. Regina's rant could have been ignored or addressed privately. Instead, Ned's reply made private conflict public, adding judgment and moral framing. This response centered him, not the issue at hand. And just like the previous reply, it reinforces the behavioral pattern: immediate public reaction over quiet, calm resolution. The lesson is clear. From day one, the instinct has been to respond publicly, to escalate and to seek validation rather than de-escalate the situation. This single example alone is enough to show the pattern, and it prepares us to understand why the recent drug test reply, while long and detailed, is just the latest chapter in a story that has been unfolding for months. And honestly, we could go on and on with examples. If you've been following the story, or if you dig through his past statements, you will see countless replies, unnecessary replies, dramatization and public escalation of situations that could have been handled privately, calmly, or with a little maturity. But we don't have time to dwell on every single one, and doing so would only drag this video unnecessarily. So let's bring ourselves back to the recent reply, the one that actually prompted everything we have been discussing today. So about this most recent reply, the first thing I want to say is this. I assume, and it's not even an assumption, it's a fact, that Ned Nwoko is a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That in itself is a full-time job. And I assume, like most senators, his schedule is extremely busy. He has responsibilities, commitments, and a foundation, children, things that demand his attention. And yet, somehow he manages to reply to every single one of Regina's posts, often within hours. Now that's where I start to wonder, how does he have time for this? Does he have notifications turned on for each of her posts? Or maybe he has a team, people monitoring her activity to know exactly when she posts something online. Because here's the thing, if I weren't a content creator, I probably wouldn't even see some of Regina's posts for days, maybe weeks. For an average person, you go to work and you have your life, you check social media during break, maybe scroll through for 10 to 15 minutes and you move on. That's normal. But here we are talking about a post that goes up and barely an hour later, there is a full curated long reply ready for public consumption. A man who should be extremely busy, handling a foundation, family, public service, somehow has the time to not only read every single post, but also draft a detailed emotional response to it. That's the first thing we need to acknowledge, because understanding how quickly and consistently he responds is key to understanding the pattern of behavior, the compulsiveness, and honestly the pettiness that runs through all of these replies. Now let's ask the big question. Why are you even concerned or so bothered about what this young lady posts or chooses to do? You made an accusation against her. That accusation ran for months. Whether it was true or false, at this point, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that an accusation was put out there, her name was defamed, and she chose this particular time to clear it. And yet, instead of being relieved or even indifferent, what do we see? Another long public reply, another attempt to center yourself in the narrative. Ask yourself this, why does her clearing her name bother you? From what I see at this stage, she hasn't even taken steps to fight for custody of her children yet. When she does, that's the time for conflict, if conflict is what you choose. But for now, why does it matter what she posts, what she says, or how she tells her story? It often looks as though the goal is to make people always see her as bad, as someone with a problem, as a drug addict. But why? She's the mother of your children. Shouldn't there be relief here, at least for the sake of the kids? Let's break it down. She's sober enough to have passed the drug test. That's progress. If your claims were true, she's actually doing the work to make herself clean. Isn't that something to acknowledge? She cleared her name. For the sake of the children, they now have evidence that their mother isn't exactly what she was painted to be. Isn't that something positive? You demanded rehabilitation, and she's following through. The goal you supposedly wanted is being achieved. So again, the question becomes, why the public reply? Why not reach out privately, work together to manage custody, or find ways to support her staying drug-free? Why post a long public dramatic response instead? At the heart of this is the bigger question. Do you really care about her well-being? Or is this about control, controlling the narrative, controlling perception, having something to hold over her? Is this about proving you are at the top of your game, or is it about having leverage, saying you cannot have access to the children unless you do this? Because that's the pattern we are seeing again and again. It's not about accountability or rehabilitation or closure, it's about control. And that's why this behavior is so concerning and so telling. So here's the final takeaway. This isn't about Regina proving anything anymore. She's done what she needed to do. She cleared her name, passed the test, and handled the situation with evidence and composure. This is about something else entirely. It's about a man who cannot let go of narrative control. Because pettiness isn't always loud insult or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it's quieter. Sometimes it's simply the inability to stop talking. The compulsive need to respond, to comment, to reassert yourself publicly, even when no response is required. And that's the lesson here. Some battles are won by evidence, by facts, by calm action. Others are lost by the need to always respond. So this brings us to the end of this analysis. If you've watched or enjoyed this video so far, please leave it a like. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos. And do not forget to share so we can reach a wider audience.